Hello, everyone. On this fine night, welcome to No Man's Podcast, or whenever you are watching or listening to it. This is episode 27, War Beneath the Streets. We're covering 3 issues of Robin, number 68 through 70, and all are written by Chuck Dixon, but not all are drawn by Staz Johnson, but that's where we start, and we'll discuss that later. And just going right into it, number 68. And this is basically the setup coming in is that this is Robin's mission. Several episodes back, Batman basically gave everyone a mission. Batgirl and Azrael went to do something. Not at that exact moment, but Catwoman had her little thing to do, and everything like that. So everyone split up, and Robin got a solo deal. And first, I want to say, honestly, probably my favorite part of the entirety of this episode is the cover for this first issue. For me personally, it's a very striking Nightmare Fuel cover from Jason Pearson, and it's just Tim in the sewer, just covered by rats, and it's something about just the way the rats are set up about him and the coloring as well. I actually really like this cover. I know some of us have been a little mixed on Jason Pearson, and in fact, honestly, I think the latter two covers are a little weak. In fact, one of them I think is bad. One of them has like a rabid kid, which I don't think has any connection to the actual story. But I really like this cover, and part of it is just like it's a little like I don't know, it's a little ironic. We also have a friend who's been on the show before, Matt, who hates rats, and this episode is very rat centric. So I've known that we've been coming to this arc, and I've been anticipating it partially to constantly tease him about it. And this cover, big fan of it. So Bruce tells Tim about an undiscovered cache of emergency food, and the food is like way expired, but it's still food in no man's land, and it's somehow leaking to the black market. And he wants Tim to figure out, where it is, how it's getting out, and also to get there and secure it before any of the villains do, because they're pretty sure that none of the villains are on it, especially not some of the like real out there ones like Joker or Two-Face or folks like that. Like, if Penguin got it or Poison Ivy, they'd probably be okay. But some goons have already gotten into it, but then get chased out by rats who are controlled by Ratcatcher, of course. And his maniacal plan, and we saw him before, like way back in, I think still in issues related to Robin. If I don't think they were Robin issues per se, I don't remember, but we saw him before. Yeah. And his plan is for the rats to use this food stash to gorge themselves and endlessly breed and multiply, so they have children and grandchildren. And especially with the status quo of No Man's Land, they will just massively outnumber the remaining Gotham residents and overwhelm them and take over the city. And I'm not really sure, what Ratcatcher gets out of it. I mean, I guess by proxy, he suddenly becomes the most powerful and remaining human. But it's kind of funny. And a lone rat catches Tim spying, and that's a little fun. And so he basically falls in the middle of all the rats, and two subplots running through. Well, two subplots in this issue, and one of them is a subplot through this arc, which doesn't really conclude much. We have Gearhead and Tommy Mangles also knowledgeable about the stash and going after it through the sewers. And we also have Stephanie Brown Stephanie Brown's mother finds her costume, and that leads to conversations. And there's also a quick reference to like Stephanie Brown's like pregnancy, which she put up for adoption and stuff like that. And that's an interesting part of the character's history, because it definitely, for those who go back and read it, and for those who are familiar with some of his later work, like Fables, or not Fables, that's wrong comparison. But it's interesting because nowadays Chuck Dixon is considered like a lightning rod creator, and people kind of know that he's conservative and stuff like that. So it's interesting to go back and see how he handled a teenage pregnancy in the Robin book. But that's not really relevant to what we're doing here. So that's 68. I think this starts off pretty strong. I think this issue in isolation does put Ratcatcher over. Obviously, it's through his rats, but he comes off pretty formidable. This is probably the most impressive he's ever been, and I doubt there's been a more impressive Ratcatcher story since. There are some. I think it's this issue. Yeah, it's this issue. There are some genuinely like frightening scenes with rats, and there's one panel I think next issue which is maybe tops them all, but not as scary as way back. There was a rat panel which didn't have anything to do with Ratcatcher, but when the No Man's Land status quo first set up, they were referencing like rats everywhere, and this guy was like eaten by rats. So, what did you guys think about this opening salvo?
Good opening. I thought it was a good opening issue, pacing pretty well across the board. I want to notice and talk about Tim's hair for just a second. He's got that like kind of mid 90s like bowl cut split part down the middle going on. That I'm calling it the Sean Hunter hair from Boy Meets World. Tim doesn't have like his normal spiky hair that we've normally seen now. I don't know when this change exactly happened, but this is the first time I'm noting it down here exactly. Also, we get the cool visual of the green night vision lenses in Tim's domino mask that are seldomly used more. We've talked about that in past episodes as well. But I thought really, really good. Staz Johnson's a very, very good artist, capturing action and flow across the page. And I mentioned this off air, but the mask on and the colors on Ratcatcher and the Sandman, the post Wesley Dodds Sandman and the JSA kind of look similar to me, and it's very odd to me, but because they both also have blonde hair, I think too. But I like Ratcatcher. I do think he's got a really cool look. He's got the gas, like the World War I-esque gas mask, and then like oxygen tank on his back, so he looks like scary. He's got that big long coat, which is fun with visuals, and then like, yeah, a sea of rats is just not cool at all. It's pretty frightening, especially when they're all gnawing at you. Tim's getting like kind of beat up and shoot around here. So I think it's a pretty good opening arc. But I'll share my thoughts on the whole arc as a whole at the end, because I do have some issues with it.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you guys said. I enjoyed this issue a lot. I enjoyed the whole arc quite a bit. The one element I just wanted to expand upon a little bit is the Tommy Mangles and Gearhead subplot, because this Gearhead character at the moment is just basically a disembodied head on this Tommy Mangles guy's back. They're both like CED list villains, and they're looking for the rations. And I just thought there was some like it seems like it would be kind of cringy, but I thought their banter was kind of funny actually. Like the Gearhead, like there's some back and forth about how Gearhead's the brains, he's Mangles the brawn, so they need each other supposedly, but they also kind of hate each other, and he keeps like bumping his head into the roof and stuff. So it's just some mildly amusing slapstick in there throughout this arc. But
yeah, it's a tiny bit self-aware, but within the book, they're not pointing fun at it, but also it's fun. Yeah, I mean, they're very annoying and not remotely interesting characters, but they're handled well within kind of the roles of this story.
Yeah.
All right, let's move along.
Okay, next is issue 69. And like Vince mentioned earlier, this one has a really strange cover. It's like, it basically looks like a rabid teenager's attacking Tim. Like he's got pointy teeth and fingernails. And there are kids in the sewer in this arc, but they're not attacking. They're not feral or rabid. It's a nonsensical cover. Anyway, this is War Beneath the Streets, Part 2, Wolflings, same creative team as last issue, Chuck Dixon, Saz Johnson, inked by Wayne Foucher, not sure how to pronounce that. Anyway, the issue starts off with the Stephanie Brown subplot with a pretty dramatic opening shot of Steph's mother holding up the spoiler costume and Steph looking shocked, and she's trying to get her to explain it. And she starts by saying, like, oh, I can't tell you. She's trying to hold on to her secret still. But her mom gets concerned that, oh, I don't need another clue master under my roof, because her husband, or probably ex-husband at this point, and Steph's father was the villain clue master, and that's where Steph's origin came from. And Steph just laughs at the idea that she's a villain or anything like her dad, and this leads to her just basically coming clean and explaining everything to her mom, except she doesn't specify that she's been working with Batman and Robin, and her explanation is like, oh, I don't think you'd believe me if I told you, because I think we're still operating under the Batman's an urban myth thing for some reason. But yeah, before we go back to them, we cut over to Tim, with the transition being her mom saying, did you do all this superhero stuff all by yourself? And she's like, well, I may have had a little help. Cut to Tim, who's having trouble with Ratcatcher and the rats, trying to fight off the rats. He gets buried in rats. Thankfully, he's got an electric shock system in his suit, which he uses to zap a whole bunch of the rats off him, dead. And Ratcatcher calls him a murderer for this and tries to run away from him. He sends his one rat who he's named Patch after him. And then we come back to Steph and her mom. And basically, yeah, she just explains the spoiler business to her mom, and her mom's pretty understanding about it. Except at the end of the conversation, she's like, oh no, everything's fine, as long as you promise never to do it again. And Steph's just like, huh? And she's literally like, Mom! And her mom's like, it's too dangerous. So this was a really fun little subplot. I've only read probably barely 2 issues worth of Stephanie Brown throughout this whole story, but I like her characterization a lot from what I've read of her so far. This is just a really relatable little exchange of a superhero's parent finding out their secret identity, and it's probably one of the better ways it could go, ideally, usually for Peter Parker, or someone that's like a catastrophic situation he never wants to happen, but in the world of DC Comics, your mom might be kind of reasonable about you being a superhero, especially if your dad's a villain. So I really like those interactions and Steph's personality and all that. Meanwhile, she's talking about how she could get killed fighting crime, and Tim is almost getting killed drowning in sewer water, drags himself out, and he passes out for the first of at least 2 times in this issue. We briefly cut to the Gearhead and Mangles or whatever. They're looking at maps and getting lost. Then Tim wakes up, looks at the same map, gets himself some antibiotics to help out with all the rat bites. He notes that he does have a current tetanus shot, and also looks like he keeps the antibiotics in those little packets that you always see on his sleeves and his gloves. That's a nice little practical costume design touch. Then he passes out again, so I guess it's 2 times this issue. And some mysterious hands take him away somewhere. He's woken up to someone putting ice on his face, and it appears that it's his father. But of course, it becomes apparent very quickly this is a dream sequence. He's like, oh, I've known your daddy for months. So have all of us. And a whole bunch of him supporting characters come into the room, and they all know his identity apparently in this dream. Except one of his friends is someone called Crocky the Crocodile. And I'm guessing it's probably just like a character from some old kid's show or something, and that's just part of it being a silly dream or whatever. And then that's not the only secret they know. They know that he wears boxers. His dad pulls the blanket off him, and they all see his boxers and laugh at him. And the only one of these other characters I recognize here is that one girl who's his love interest with the dark hair. I think, is Dana her name? He mentions Dana. She showed up earlier in this story way back when. Anyway, he wakes up for real, and he's surrounded by these kids dressed up like Mad Max characters practically, or just that sort of vibe. He finds that the leader of them he recognizes from a high school class, and oh, they're like nerds who played role-playing games, but they've survived all this time in the subway by pretending to be like a tribe of warriors out of like Mad Max or some fantasy story or something. It's all very silly, but they've somehow managed to survive this long. Uh, and let's see. He tells them about his mission he has to get back to. They want to help him out. He doesn't want any help because they're crazy kids playing sword and sorcery. Uh, uh, oh yeah, it comes up a few times. He's confused as to where they got the ice they're cooling his face with. And meanwhile, Gearhead and Mangles come across some mini icebergs in the water. And the answer is where everyone's getting ice underground in no man's land is none other than Mr. Freeze. And the issue ends with to be concluded. So yeah, I like this issue quite a bit. I like the Steph and her mom stuff, as I said. The crazy Mad Max kids living in the sewers is probably my least favorite part of this arc. Like it's kind of fun, but kind of silly, and there's so much other stuff here we could have done without it. But yeah, I continue to like the art and the writing and everything. And we get the new element of Mr. Freeze thrown in the end of this issue. So, what do you guys think of this issue?
It's all right. I think the first issue is the standout among all these, and maybe the third, kind of in the middle. Yeah, the whole role playing kids, the Wolflings, not super interesting. And also, we've seen that concept like 3 times already, like kid gangs in No Man's Land. Um, I thought it was interesting that in that last page or two, when Mr. Freeze pops out, he kind of uses some Batman and Robin style puns. Not all the way, but a little bit. And then there's like one maybe in the next issue, but I was expecting we would veer in that direction suddenly, but we really don't. It's just like 2 on this page.
Yeah, I think in the next issue, like one of the people arresting him makes a pun and he gets annoyed with them for that or something like that. But he also made a couple puns. So yeah, they're kind of like the ice puns a bit, I guess.
And it is kind of weird. Like, I don't think she's not actually in the next issue at all. She's only in these first 2. And in total, Stephanie Brown has maybe 4 pages across these 2 issues. But, and I mean, that's the nature of Stephanie Brown for almost all of her history, is that she was a minor support, or not a minor, but she was a supporting character in Robin. But she gets 4 pages in the middle of this giant crossover, which she's not in there. She's not in Gotham right now. Well, actually, I think she is on the outskirts or whatever.
She's an upper suburb that I think it wasn't his.
Because we did see like her people like evacuated in like a big gymnasium or something like that. Yeah. But she hasn't been up to much. We get 4 pages here, and ultimately like a major advancement for the character. I mean, not really. I'm sure it doesn't actually impact a ton, but her mother figuring out her secret identity, kind of a big deal. And not really relevant to anything we're doing. So interesting to see it here. I mean, we've seen that in some of the other books, like Nightwing, where they're pulling along the ongoing plot lines from before and after No Man's Land, which since we're not reading everything around it, it doesn't, we don't have the full context and it doesn't really matter. So honestly, we could have just skipped those pages, but whatever.
My thoughts are pretty much the same as Vince's, though I got more of a what is it, Lord of the Flies vibe from the kids than Mad Max.
I was thinking like Thunderdome specifically, when there's literally a tribe of kids, but yeah,
that one.
Yeah, that's I guess mostly what's in the back of my head. What's
So, yeah, I don't really love it with the whole Lord of the Flies kids, because that's what I'm calling it at this point. I think it's kind of like it verges on the okay, this isn't like it's dumb territory. I'd rather have them just be like just kids that are living down there. You don't have to go like full out Lord of the Flies, Mad Max with it and the way they're wearing and what they're wearing. But yeah, it's a fine issue. It is a little bit of a problem, I think, when the standout stuff for us is 4 pages of Stephanie Brown and not the Robin stuff that we take away and like more. I will note that as a little bit interesting, but I'll close this out with issue 70, which on the credits we do change this time. It is Gordon Purcell coming on to do pencils on this, but you could have told me it was still Stas Johnson, and I really wouldn't have noticed a difference because Wayne Foucher and Andrew and Roy, the inker and colorists, are still the same here. Then obviously Dixon's still writing. Opening with a nice giant splash page of Mr. Freeze's face. And every time I see this costume, I'm going to mention that I hate it because it's terrible. But he's frozen Gearhead and Tommy Mangles and getting the information from them on where this supply of food is. And hoping that he doesn't have to come back because if he's lying, he'll kill them as they're all frozen in the ice. Robin's struggling to his feet, trying to, and he's also told the kids where all the supplies are, and they're going to go out and get it. And he's trying to stop them because it's too dangerous. But he's kind of going in and out of consciousness, running a fever, waiting for his antibiotics to kick in. And then Freeze runs into the rat catcher, who is also going around the sewers following the ice, and they kind of team up going, hey, let's both find this stuff. And they end up teaming up more so for Freeze, like just freezing and then like skewering one of his rats, showing that if he double crosses him, he can just kill him like that. So they team up. Tim continues to have dreams of Batman saying that he failed, but with one of the girls, who he finds out her full name is Chandra. He's able to find out where they're going and try to stop them because he knows Ratcatcher's also on his way there. The kids, Ratcatcher, and Freeze all convene at the same time while Robin's on his way. The kids are running away, but one of them drops their bow and arrow, which Robin's able to grab. And while the whole fracas is going on inside the warehouse, Robin kind of takes point up top with a bow and arrow, mentioning that he's no Green Arrow, but Oliver Queen did teach Batman how to shoot an arrow, and Batman taught him. And I thought that was a cool moment where Robin starts plucking arrows at Freeze and Ratcatcher to get the drop on him, as the kids then start toppling over some shelving on top of Freeze to take out Ratcatcher and Freeze. Robin, able to use his physics knowledge, is able to trap Freeze under one of the frozen pipes that makes it burst, thus freezing Freeze to the ground, making it so if he were to get up, he would break his armor, which would obviously kill him. And then he calls the Blue Boys to come in, and they're able to take it off there. I believe it's Lieutenant Bach who comes in to get Freeze, and that's where we get the Freeze pun as he's making it, as they're showing up. Batman and Batgirl are watching over the whole situation as everyone's being lured back to the Blue Boys' hideout, and he then carries Robin back to base because Robin is passed out once again due to the fever. I thought this was a good issue. This was my favorite one of the issue, but critically on the story for me, I thought it was a little late in the game to introduce Freeze here, just right out of the blue with the last issue, and I thought it added a little bit too much of an element to it, just because I thought it was like a little bit rushed near the end with all the Freeze stuff. But I still think the arc was pretty good, and I think the pencils here still, like I said, it still looks like Stas Johnson to me. It's not a big deviation, which is nice to see. It's still kind of very kind of house style for DC at this time. I still think it's a good arc, though. Not the best. There's some problems here and there, but a good arc nonetheless.
Yeah, I was slightly. I think I still liked it overall, but I was slightly disappointed. I was kind of thrown off that I was really expecting this to be the Ratcatcher arc, the put over Ratcatcher, and he's in the sewers. He's got a ton of rats. It's a perfect status quo for him, and also following Legacy and Contagion, which would be perfect status quo. But but he just gets buried by Mr. Freeze, and Freeze does that by it basically interrogates him by killing like 2 rats and teasing him about it. And like, I get it, he's sympathetic to the rats, he's in charge of the rats, but if Ratcatcher can be flipped by hurting 2 rats, he's super pointless. He's super ineffective. Otherwise, because honestly, like if you think through it really hard, it's a little different because they're in the sewers, so there's water involved as well, which is potentially in Frieza's favor. But like in this status quo, Ratcatcher with like tons of rats, I feel like a couple hundred rats could overwhelm Mr. Freeze enough to cover him or knock him over, and then all it takes is just enough to get the gun out of his hands or to crack that helmet and stuff like that.
Well, see, I think they could start chewing on wires on his suit and start making that haywire.
Or just any way. I mean, it would even if you still bring in Freeze to this arc, it'd be interesting to see Ratcatcher be like, no, fuck you, and Ratcatcher defeat Mr. Freeze. And also on that note, basically, is that also Gearhead and Tommy, which we acknowledge they're D-level, they're just there to get buried. But this 3rd issue basically flips the whole script, where you have Freeze literally taking the place of Gearhead and Tommy, and you have the dumb Wolflings take the place of Robin while he's sick and hallucinating. So like 2/3 of this issue in particular, we're kind of following the characters that we weren't promised from the 1st issue. Technically not the character that stars in the book, but obviously Tim does wake up and might discuss all that. But I think overall it still comes together well. It's just not quite. I mean, I had preconceived notions, especially on that first cover, which I genuinely like. I was really expecting this to be the definitive Ratcatcher arc. Like if they put out a best of Ratcatcher trade, like they do those. They're called the Batman Arkham series.
You're never going to get one of those for Ratcatcher.
They're all named after villains. This would be like the centerpiece of Ratcatcher, but it really wouldn't be, because it's ultimately arguably more of a Mr. Freeze story, because he's the bigger villain, he's the victorious villain up until he's not, of course. Yeah, I thought it was art. I think the art was good too, except my tiny nitpick is at the very end, when Gordon Bursell draws Batman, especially maybe part of it is that it is in daytime, like most of No Man's Land has been. That always impacts, how we view Batman. But Gordon Purcell's Batman, I didn't think was super strong. I'm not sure that Saz Johnson would have necessarily done better.
I like Gordon Purcell's Batman more than Stas Johnson's.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts. Overall, I'd still give it a plus.
Yeah, I don't have any more thoughts on it. Like I wrapped up on mine. So Michael, if you have anything else to add.
Way better than last week's issues.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
But yeah, fun arc. Could have done without the sewer kids, but yeah, good arc.
All right, that is War Beneath the Streets.
Stick around on the channel to listen to the Invincible podcast.
And next episode, we have, I believe it's called I Cover the Waterfront, which Batgirl does a little thingy, and Bane is back.
We should also note that we're now officially on No Man's Land Volume 3.
Yep. All right, so thanks for watching this episode, and tune in next time. Bye-bye. And also just keep this YouTube open.
He left without clicking the thing again. Did it again.
Shoot. So we're still on air now?
Mm-hmm.